Hello everyone, welcome once again to Constantine Discussions. I am Captain Logan.
I'm Steve Baxter.
And today we are talking about, what is the name of today's episode? It is Rage of Caliban. And before we get into today's episode, we're going to talk again briefly about last week's episode, which was Dance Voodoo, talk about some of the questions and comments from this week. And real quick before we do that, I want to mention, Steve and I were talking about this a little bit before the show, that I've been getting a lot of messages from people, and I was getting this before we put up last week's episode, where people were like, oh no, Cap, did you hear that the show got production halted? And I was like, yeah, I heard about that. We talked about that on Constantine this week, where we were like, breaking news, because Steve was just sitting, oh man, I just found this, because like Steve Scott is his button on the pulse, man. He's constantly checking his email or and Facebook and stuff, just in case something about the show that we're doing, something important and applicable comes up. But anyway, Steve was telling me that the same thing happened with Hannibal a couple years back, and it got renewed, so maybe there's nothing to worry about.
Yeah, it seems as though, like, NBC seems to do this with these kinds of shows, where Hannibal had a really high premiere, not much higher than Constantine, but every subsequent episode just had lower and lower ratings, and the finale barely broke 2. It was only like 1.98, and Constantine keeps going up, and it's still in the 3 to 4 range. So NBC halted production, but I don't think we should be afraid, because it's definitely nowhere near their lowest rated show.
And you said that a bunch of fans are already starting a petition to try to keep it going.
Oh yeah, if you go on Twitter, there's 2 things you will see all day, and that's Star Wars and Save Constantine. So I feel like we're in safe hands.
Yeah, I mean, if that's second only to Star Wars right now, even after Hunger Games coming out, we might be in good shape. I think that if it does get canceled, somebody picks it up. I don't think there's any reason to worry that it doesn't get picked up. And maybe that's somewhat wishful thinking. I'm really hoping it happens. I think this is a wonderful show. I think TV needs this show. I think it's fresh. I think there's nothing else like it on right now, and it's one of the only things I can think of that is really dark and is a very tragic kind of show, but is like still super fun and quirky. I feel like it's one of the things that is helping to bring the fun back to this kind of stuff, and yet it's still really super dark and depressing a lot of the time.
Yeah, I mean, like, you look at these characters' histories that we get every episode, and it's some really messed up stuff, but it doesn't stop them to have, like, really fun and enjoyable lines. Like, this episode's a pretty good example of that.
It is, yeah. Yeah, we'll get to that. All right, so why don't we go and talk just briefly about some of the questions and comments from last time. Bozidar Durovic. I'm sure I messed that up. I apologize. I think that the driver being a molester was done just to make us think that something bad will happen to the kid, so we don't think that the kid is the one who will do something bad, just a misdirection, so we'll figure out that the kid is dead. I don't think there is more to it than that. There's a slight possibility that the rising darkness made his tendencies manifest stronger than they usually would, but I personally doubt that was the case. Also, the fact that he wanted to molest a ghost was kind of disturbing. Yeah, good call, Steve. If you don't know what he's talking about, Steve and I last week were a little bit, and Steve, I think you started that. I think you brought that up. You started it, Steve. I think you brought that up, and you were like, I don't know what he was doing. I'm very confused by that. He might have a point, but it was still ambiguous at the very least.
Yeah, I kind of don't like it when TV shows do that, just for kind of the cheap drama of distracting you. But it was a small moment. I don't mind that much.
We can forgive a little bit of that, given that they don't fall into too many TV traps.
No, they don't.
Although this week I think they got closer than they usually have been, but we'll talk about that. Renwick Davis, plot twist. Steve turns out to be Zombie Thing MD. It all makes sense now. Steve,
maybe I am.
Why are you? I mean, cheating on Geekvolution is just stupid, man. It's there's nothing in it for you. I don't know why you're doing that.
It's the glory, okay? It's the glory.
ZNE Smillian, yeah, that old guy was a pedophile because he rubbed his lap, kept asking questions, making sure if that kid was actually going to be alone. I guess even after 2 years of doing Spawn Year, I am still that innocent that I did not pick up on that. Well, I guess it didn't completely ruin me. Red Letter Red Leader Antilles, there was some subtext in the scene where John tells him that you have to live with this stuff. It fits in with the theme, but alluded to the fact that when Jim becomes the Spectre, he has to deal with the Spectre part of him. Yeah, we didn't talk enough about that. Also, it was brilliant to have this episode have people who die due to the cruelty of others or their own mistakes, because the Spectre deals more with the cruelty of everyday people rather than the ghosts and stuff that John deals with. Thank you for that insight. I don't know anything about the Spectre, and so it's good to know that, as I kind of expected, they get that character, and there was some underlying stuff going on.
Yeah, the Spectre is essentially DC's more eloquent Ghost Rider, so a lot of that stuff fits in.
When you say eloquent, you mean just he speaks really well? Is that...
He speaks very well. He's also oddly gentlemanly, unlike Ghost Rider, who rides around in leather. So.
Not to be confused with Gentleman Ghost. That's a whole... the Gentleman Spectre.
Yes. And Ghost Rider only has like 2 or 3 phrases, so...
James McCarthy, Cap, do you think you could recommend people watch Constantine during your Flash, Gotham, and Arrow discussions? Might help a little. I mean, it won't help enough to keep the show on the air, but, yeah, that might not be a bad idea. Oh, I almost read the trivia question. If you want to answer the trivia question, go to Geekvolution.com, click on the contact page. Let me do 1 or 2 more, shall we? Damn fine cup of coffee, Cap. You really got to start watching some better TV. Fair enough. I'm liking a lot of the stuff I'm watching, though.
I don't know. I'm watching a lot of TV shows. This is still my favorite.
But there is still some really good stuff. Yeah. Oh yeah, maybe that's what he's saying. He's like, well, this is not the best thing on. It might not be the best thing. When I say that, I'm mostly talking best thing out of the shows we're reviewing on the channel. But yeah, because honestly, I don't know if I would put it above Bates Motel. I don't know if I go that far.
I just watched the first season of that show. I think I would.
Really? Well, you're wrong, because I love that show. And I'll watch season 2, and you might not, or you might still look. I don't know.
No, I mean, you might be right. The only thing with me in that show is that I think it's as subtle as a hammer to the forehead.
Okay, fair enough, but it seems subtle enough for what it is. I don't know. Let's not talk about that right now. Let's go on now. I'm not prepared for that. Let's go on now to today's episode, Rage of Caliban. And why don't you start us someplace, Steve? Throw out a big like or dislike and get the ball rolling.
Okay. So this episode is strange. I don't think it's anywhere near as good as the last 2 or 3 we've had, and that's not to say it's bad. It just seems really bland to me.
Yeah.
And I don't even mean that in bad way. Like, I enjoyed myself watching it, but there was nothing in here that was as dense as the last couple episodes. And part of that might be because this is the episode that got reworked after Zed was introduced, and this was intended to be the 2nd episode.
Yeah, and I didn't know that. That kind of illuminates the whole thing for me. The big question I had through most of it was, where the heck is Zed? She's never mentioned. What happened to her?
Well, in the beginning they said Zed's in art school this week, or art class.
Oh, was that? I missed that. Okay.
So yeah, they addressed that, but then part of the concern's also, like, John talks to Constantine, Manny talks to Constantine.
He talks to himself.
They haven't met very much before, and they're still establishing the relationship, even though in the past episodes they already had that together.
I can see where you're going with that. I kind of thought it was more of what we've been having. I didn't see it as really a step back so much as just not really adding much, except for one token piece of mythology. He's got that line about I'm trying to remember what exactly it was. Something about angels and. I forget what it was. It's in my notes. But anyway, there's like one mythology thing, and that's about it. But now that you say that, yeah, I can totally see why you would say that.
Yeah, because Manny's talking about he can't directly influence John because of free will.
That's what it is, free will.
And then
yeah.
John still asks him for help, and they establish the fact that he's only there as a guide. But it seems like John knew that the last few episodes, and it seems strange that he would ask him this time.
Did he actually come right out and ask you? Because the thing is, that is a thing that has been repeated a few times. There's been a lot of, I am just a guide, I can't interfere directly, and John going, well, you guys are all hypocrites anyway, so you should help me out. And I did kind of like that moment here. I don't think the Manny stuff really added very much of anything, but I did this episode. But I did kind of like that moment when Manny was like, oh, I am helping you, sort of in a way directly because I'm giving you guidance, and John's like, gee, thanks, that's so helpful. I kind of liked that, but you're right. 6 episodes in, he knows that. I didn't even think of it as a backtrack because, like I said, I didn't know that this was supposed to be second episode, but
yeah, there's a little.
I thought it was just more of the same.
Yeah, there's a little bit of that here and there. Like they still talk about the house as if they've just gotten there, and there's stuff they haven't seen before.
Oh, that's a good point.
The fact that it's Halloween and that this episode was supposed to air on Halloween.
I wondered about that one. Yeah, because the second episode did air on Halloween.
Yeah, exactly.
And I was like,
this was
isn't it November?
You can tell that they were trying to do that because this is definitely more horror than we've gotten in the previous episodes.
So much to the point where it was kind of predictable, and I thought kind of hit a lot of the horror tropes. And this episode this show, plays with the horror tropes. I thought that's what we were doing at the beginning. I was waiting for stuff to turn on its head, and then it kind of went exactly where I expected it to. When they introduce the guy in the wheelchair who doesn't say anything, I immediately went, oh, astral projection, and it's sort of astral projection. It's not exactly the same thing. I do think the whole his soul has been out of his body for years and years and years and doesn't come back is a little fresh. That's kind of interesting. Nothing's really done with it. It's just sort of there. And it seemed like that was mostly just a plot thing to make it easier for John to actually be able to make the exorcism work and not have to worry about a child involved, or at least, well, there is a child involved, but I just felt like they like the exorcism probably went easier because there was some place for it for the soul to go. You know what I mean? Now that you say this is supposed to be the second episode, I think I like it less than I did, because
there's parts where you can tell like they clearly made this episode so John could scare Liv about what this world is really like, and she wouldn't be told blind to it anymore, and then we could progress from there. And then they really clearly cut that out and made it kind of.
The other thing that's sort of tough about it, potentially moving on, is this seems to be. Part of the point of the ending of this seems to be that there is potentially some optimism where John doesn't lose every time. Like, you get to the end of this and everything works out, and we haven't had an episode like that yet. I mean, like he always wins at the end, but there's almost always some kind of a big, or even not so big, kind of, he has to pay for it somehow, right? There's some kind of a consequence, and I mean, maybe second episode is the closest thing to there wasn't much of a consequence. This episode seems a little bit awkward after we had the episode where he where he intentionally manipulates an old friend of his and has to kill him and stuff, right? Like I don't know. After that happens, it's hard for me to be as excited for John and yay, you won one. You know what I mean? Like this, it just seems out of sequence. I think it's a better episode if it is the second episode, and I think the second episode is a better episode if it was after this one.
Agreed.
It's simply out of sequence. You almost wish there was a disclaimer at the beginning that said these events take place before this event, you know, and then it kind of works. And frankly, I think you could almost read it that way if it weren't for the fact that Zed, right? And you know what? The other thing too is you even got. It's almost like I'm seeing things after you said that were supposed to be things that would progress us to things we've seen already. For instance, you've got Chaz getting sandwiched between those cars. Like, last episode or the episode before, we saw him get totally eviscerated. So, like, that makes that look just like kind of a nod thing where it's like, haha, yep, once again, Chaz getting kind of mortally wounded. That probably, if that was in the script in the first place, who knows, would have been more of like a building block to get us to another evisceration. I don't know. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a little awkward, especially because the Chaz stuff before this is he only dies maybe every other episode. It's a little bit more sporadic, and if this was really the second episode, it'd feel like a little bit too hammered in. And then also, John's got a weird character slope if you would take this as the sixth episode, where this is all about him getting his confidence back. Yeah. And that doesn't gel with what we had before at all. So you really have to either take this as the second episode, or it makes his character arc less fluid.
It might gel if I thought that we were actually going to build off of it and let him keep getting kind of that confidence boost, but again, that almost seems disingenuous given what we've had to watch him do in the past to make him more tragic, right? Like stuff where, you know, we can't condone his behavior, but we understand why it happens. Then all of a sudden we throw him a bone. Like that. I don't know. You need a little bit of time in between, right? Because I mean, like, he's done some really awful things in the name of the better good, of the greater good. And at the very, very least, it makes this episode just a little bit superfluous, you know? Because it's like, well, we know that's not gonna last. And maybe also even with the sequence being a little bit off, feels like we're repeating too many things. Like, we've already had, in 6 episodes, plenty of examples of John going into a situation that uncomfortably reminds him too much of what he did to that little girl and sending her to hell. Now we got yet another, like, we keep hammering that over and over and over again, and as long as we keep doing it in kind of different ways, but I don't know, we've been dealing with kids a lot, and that's a motif, and it's a good one, and we should be doing that, and there's a couple things here that we'll talk about that I really liked with that, just isolated scenes, but I think we've already handled the kid thing a little better.
Yeah, agreed. I feel like this one is just a little bit too on the nose, and I mean, I respect the writers enough to that, yeah, this is one of those things where they couldn't be helped, they weren't sure what they were doing at the last minute. Yeah. That doesn't make the episode any better or worse for that.
Honestly, I would have just cut it. I would have just not done the script at all. And the thing is, you got to fulfill an episode number. I get that. They needed 13. They probably just had 12. They had to use this one because they had it laying around. Same thing has happened with lots and lots of other shows. I've seen it happen with Star Trek: The Original Series. We're like we've got this script. Guess we got to go with it. In retrospect, even though the second episode only did like 0.9 million viewers, it didn't do very well. Just for the progression of the series, I do think that it's probably for the best that they went with the episode they went with, in introducing Zed right away, and in that it feels like a more competently written episode than this one does. So I'm glad we got what we got. I think this would have been maybe a little bit of a step back, but I would have just cut it. I would have just not done it, I think. And having said that, there's stuff I like, and we should talk about some of the stuff we like. Why don't you go, and then I'll look through my notes for a second, and we'll throw some things out.
Okay, well, one of the things I really did enjoy is, even barring, like, the character issues, I think the idea of John getting his confidence back by exercising a demon is actually really cool.
Yeah.
I like the fact that he talks about naming it and how naming it is what takes away its power or gives it its power, because that's a really big thing with him in the comics about naming a demon is very important to what you're doing and has a lot to do with the girl that he accidentally sent to hell. I thought all of that was handled pretty well. Yeah, it's not the most solid the show's been before, but I thought the shots of it were really good. I thought the child actor that he got, the kid from the Amazing Spider-Man films, was really good.
Oh, is that who that was? I didn't even put 2 and 2 together. You're right. He was great. That's probably the reason he got this.
Yeah.
He was really good. I thought he was creepy. I thought he was wonderfully disturbing. I thought he had a lot of range.
Yeah, agreed. I liked a lot of his scenes. I didn't like the jump scares we got with him.
Yeah.
But I thought, like, at least the directing for his acting and for his movement and stuff was really cool. I love the ending funhouse scene.
Yeah, me too. I don't think a lot of the fake outs worked. No. Like the thing with the carving knife, it was tense, and I liked some of the, when we get to dialogue, when we get to quotes, there's a line there I really liked and stuff, but like as that's going on, I'm like, yeah, he's not gonna stab her right now. They're trying to build us too hard to that. So some of the fake outs didn't work. But that scene at the end, inside the funhouse is really cool. Like that haunted house. I love the way it was put together. I thought it was a good haunted house. I thought that was cool. I liked that John had things jumping out at him, and he was actually kind of creeped out by it because he didn't know if it was really the demon. I thought that stuff really worked. As it was going on, I was like, are you really gonna try to make me buy that John's gonna be freaked out by animatronic things? But it was cool because the mask that the kid was wearing was kind of similar to some of those, and so it was really hard to tell what was what. The lighting in that was really cool, just like atmospherically. I wish we'd gotten to that scene on Halloween night.
Yeah, agreed.
Because
this
boy, that
episode
was
like, really
just
clearly
ambiance.
made by like a Halloween director, and they wanted to go with that vibe.
That stuff was awesome. I mean, that was perfect. I loved the way all that was shot. I loved the, as you said, I loved the cinematography during as he was actually doing the exorcism and all that. Just it was fun. That was worth the whole episode. I mean, like, there's a lot of stuff in it I just thought was kind of just there and bland and kind of really typical horror. And as I said last week, people have been complaining that there's too many like the flashing lights and the kind of obvious horror stuff. This episode to like the nth degree, and then you get to that scene and they do stuff with it, and they're creative with that stuff, and I almost didn't mind it as much.
Yeah, agreed. This episode feels more in line with like the standard detective occult sort of stuff we gotten on TV. Like, it feels like Supernatural, it feels like Grimm, it feels like Once Upon a Time when that show gets creepy. So in that way, it's not as fresh as Constantine usually is.
Yeah.
But I feel like for what it is, for being like that really generic episode of Supernatural, it's a good episode of Supernatural.
The thing I got the most out of this was John doesn't have any sympathy for the possessing spirit because he relates too much with it.
Yes.
And that was really interesting. I want to read my notes on that if you'll permit me. Neither John or the possessing spirit got past their childhood trauma, and they're still brooding and making poor choices because of it. Neither really grew up. John doesn't empathize because he sees himself when he looks at him and sees his behavior as deplorable just as he sees his own, and in that sense I feel like I got more out of this than I would have if I hadn't seen that episode, a couple episodes where he did that. So where he did that horrible thing to an old friend of his because he felt like he had to. So I'll give it that. I did see more in the story because of what I knew, I think. So I guess in that way I'm glad that I saw it when I did. But anyway, the difference between them is that John keeps doing awful stuff for the right reasons and hates himself for it, but in the moment feels there's no other choice. Like I said, always lose-lose situations. But this guy's just lashing out at the world and punishing people because he couldn't punish his own parents. And John has always blamed only himself and therefore punishes only himself. So he's not empathizing with this guy because like he's handling it in even a worse way than John does.
Yeah, agreed. I think a lot of that does come to light when we have that prison scene between John and Manny. John trying to figure out how he's getting inside this kid's head, and Manny saying that a lot of John's own childhood traumas are really clouding in what he's doing here.
Yeah.
We get that really good line by Manny where he says something along the lines of, if you want to save a child, you have to remember what it's like to be one. And if you take that literally, or you take that just generically of like, well, what do kids want? It doesn't work. But John and this kid have something very common, and something very specific in common. And it's only John that could, in a way, save him. Even though Manny says earlier that they come to John out of desperation. It's almost like they want him to think that, but deep down there is something special about John, even the fact that it's because he has a terrible childhood, or he has a terrible life, and that's kind of what makes him effective. Yeah,
and he, I said that he sees himself in the spirit. He sees himself in that, as I said, the spirit. Anyway, it turns out he's actually a living person, but it's just the spirit isn't in his body. I do kind of like that. But like he sees himself in it because he can't get over his own childhood just like that guy does. Where the parallel breaks down and why John isn't really sympathetic with him is because John didn't have abusive parents and stuff, or did he? Did he have his dad?
His dad used to beat him, and he called him killer for killing his mom at childbirth. So.
Oh yeah. I'm sorry, I forgot about that. Yeah, right. Yes, that whole thing. But and that's the reason he has this really messed up psychology about the death of his mother, and he still kind of blames himself for his mom's death. But this guy doesn't have that. Like, I don't know that this guy is blaming himself for his own childhood. I guess you don't know. You just don't really know enough about him, right?
Yeah, he's not the most well-developed bad guy.
No, and nobody else in this is.
This is a chance to do it, considering all the other ones we've had are just standard demons that don't talk.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's strange. I also think that this episode not undercuts, but it's just it's not as well handled as that moment between Papa Midnight and John last episode where he's like, I can help you talk with your mother.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's just the right note expressing everything that this episode's trying to do, but it's just in a really quick, subtle moment, and you don't have to make a whole 40 minutes out of it.
And the problem is, in the sequence of the episodes, we've already been there now.
Yeah.
So yeah. For the record, I do now remember that John's dad was abusive, but I forgot that he was abusive more than just verbally. I forgot about that part. My biggest issue, outside of the structure of the episode and the kind of typicalness of the horror, really was just the parents of the kid didn't feel like real people to me.
Yeah, agreed. I thought the dad and mom were really cookie cutter examples of uncomplimentary parenting types. Of like, just one is really trying to make everything caring and about him, and the other one's all about like aggression or trying to stand up for yourself, and that comes out the wrong way.
Yeah. The general roles are really
stereotypical. Bad necessarily. It's just like they made the stereotypical choices.
Well, and I felt bad about it because you're right, the acting wasn't bad, and I felt like they were doing the best they could with what they had. But I mean, like, they kind of threw the dad way too under the bus. I mean, like, he had to kind of just be the idiot male who's like who like is aggressive and wants his kid to be tough, and only the wife will listen to Constantine. I mean, like, I get that a lot of people resist what they don't understand, or that we at least like to play that up a lot in things like this. But if it were my kid and he just fractured somebody's skull, I would probably listen to the guy who shows up and says something weird is going on. You know? And I mean, like yeah, John probably could have handled that with a little bit more finesse. I think it is a little bit weird that before that he was like, yeah, you can't just like go in and start telling the parents what's really going on, and then that's exactly what he does, and like it was played like desperation, like there wasn't any, like he didn't, like things had progressed too far, and all he could do now is tell them exactly what's going on. But I wasn't sure why at that moment. I was sort of like, nah, I think you should really kind of like ease more into that. You have a little bit of time now. Something else I wanted to ask you about is, I was a little bit confused as to what exactly the spirit was trying to do with possessing kids. Like, was the idea that he was trying to live the perfect childhood and then would immediately kill the parents when anything went wrong? Is that what it was supposed to be?
Well, the way they describe it is the spirit's just lashing out at parents, and he says the trigger is conflict. Right. So he attacks them whenever they fight. The problem with that is he starts attacking them and like the light bulbs and stuff before they ever show signs of that.
Yeah, and the other thing too is I just kept getting the sense that, like, I didn't know what he was waiting for. You know, yeah, if it's just conflict, but I guess the question is, why does he choose the parents he chooses? Is it totally random? Does he just?
Well, he said, like they said, like the magical mumbo jumbo of like the delay lines and stuff. That's part of the comic.
Oh, that's really right, and it goes on a. Why did it go on a path? I mean, like why was he leading toward that except just so that Constantine had some way to find him?
Yeah, it was kind of contrived in that respect. They say like the kids always like have weird mood swings before they kill their parents, but it's strange because it's like every couple with one kid lives right next to each other, and all of them fight, and so the demon's able to just go hopping house to house and kill people.
Well, to be fair, everybody sometimes fights. Or at least doesn't always completely 100% get along. I feel like if he possessed me and my wife, it would take longer. Or if he possessed our kid, it would take longer. But here's what I would have appreciated. Why exactly was it conflict? I could have appreciated that a lot more if it was a spirit that simply killed his parents and the parents were fine people. They were good. There was nothing wrong. He something snapped in his head. He had a mental disorder. Something awful. Killed his parents. The fact that he was capable of doing that was really traumatic for him, and he hated himself for it. And then the spirit left his body, and he kind of forgot everything, and he kept reliving that over and over again. That's not what we have here. We have a guy. We have a kid who had the most extreme kind of. Like parents abusing him that I've ever heard of, really. Like his parents or his dad like sliced his fingers off. Why was it just parents fighting that made him want to kill? What I'm saying is, what in his own situation connected up with the conflict of the parents fighting? It should have been connected. There should have been. I thought that was a little sloppy.
Yeah, agreed. I feel like instead of maybe even just going from instead of regular parents going to the opposite extreme of just killing couples that are abusive, like very specifically abusive.
Sure. And then you got to get rid of the.
Relate to John a little bit of like, well, where were you when my dad was abusing me, and you could have helped me kill him or something like that, and explore the character type a little bit.
That's interesting too. Yeah. So what's happening right now, of course, as always, we don't want to rewrite the thing, but what's happening right now is that Steve and I are finding that we're thinking of things that we think would have been way more interesting than what they did. Maybe there's a missed opportunity there. Whichever way you go with it, what they have isn't adding up really, and it makes the characters a great deal less interesting because of it.
Yeah, and I feel like the problem with that is there's very clearly a missing element of, like, Liv's whole thing was her parents and her lineage and her dad, and there's mentions of his dad in here, and this episode's all about parents and stuff, and without that character, those themes just don't line up the way they're probably supposed to.
I agree with that. Let's go on now to best moment, worst moment, and Steve, what was your favorite moment for the episode?
This was hard. I don't think any scene like really particularly stood out that much. I think the ending carnival scene was good, but I think my favorite moment definitively is the confrontation between Manny and John in the jail. I thought the acting in that was fantastic. I thought the dialogue in that was really good. And then it's followed really quickly up by the final shot at the end of the episode where John's smoking on top of the car. I just think that looks fantastic.
I wondered how you could possibly have had that many cigarette butts sitting in a cigarette thing at the bar, but there's no smoke in the air whatsoever. It clearly was a bar that nobody was smoking in, but then you had a cigarette thing that had like 16 butts in it or something, and I was like, huh, that doesn't look right. My favorite moment was most certainly the entire thing in the haunted house, and that is one of my now most fun favorite, like, boy, this is fun to watch scenes in the whole show, even though I think this is my least favorite episode so far, but I loved that stuff. I thought it was fantastic. Yeah,
it was great. They even parallel a cover from one of the Hellraiser issues, and it looks fantastic with all the skulls behind him and stuff.
You know what? I'm going to backtrack on that. This is not my least favorite episode. I think I still enjoyed this episode more than the second one.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, weirdly enough, and I think that both have some kind of typical stuff going on. This is technically not as good of an episode as that, but I think I did enjoy it more.
I think that's fair to say. I think I like Zed, so I enjoy that episode just a bit more on the level of at least that episode's adding something to what we know.
Of course, yeah. Mm-hmm. You can point all kinds of reasons it's better. I agree with you. I just I
don't think it's by a great margin though or anything.
I meant to say this earlier. At the beginning of this episode, they in 10 to 15 minutes have already given us two really typical like horror movie kid tropes. And I really thought we were going to do a whole episode about that. I thought we were just going to keep adding those, you know, because you've got the kid at the beginning who is afraid of the dark, and then turns out that there's actually something to be afraid of. And before that, you've got the super scary kid that kills people. And I mean, like, I don't know. I felt like I was seeing a lot of things I've seen before, and thought maybe we're gonna turn all that on its head. But then we just did it. And then you got the astral projection thing. That's the third one. Yeah. Sorry. Let's go on to worst moment. And what was yours?
I really didn't like the pumpkin scene.
Oh, you didn't? Okay. All right. I mean, I'm with you. I knew where it was going. I thought it was well acted.
I think there's two things with that scene. One is, and this isn't a big deal, but just the fact that pumpkins are hard to carve. So the fact that you walked in and walked out and they're just destroyed and should have sent off a flare. And really, the first thing you say when your kid destroys two pumpkins is, you know, you're not supposed to be holding the knife?
Yeah. And you know, this episode had that in spades. This always drives me crazy, where you have people that ignore obviously supernatural things happening.
Yeah.
Where you're just like, no, that's not possible. You should be losing your mind on how impossible that is. That's one of the things that drove me crazy about the dad not listening to anything Constantine was saying, because you just watched a thing fly out of away from your kid, it looked almost telekinetic. I mean, like I forget what it was, but something just like flew off, and I'm like, Did you not wonder how that was even possible? Like,
yeah, or you're supposedly
the Mandrake root,
not freaking out when there's light bulbs all over the place and you're smashing and you get your feet cut up. Like, you don't think, like, what caused that change in character?
Yeah. No, yeah. It was that Mandrake root. But yeah, like you're that flew across the room. But yeah, things keep obviously crazy things keep happening with this kid, and he just keeps being totally in denial about it, and that didn't come from a character place.
Yeah. I mean, again, it would have helped if they gave those guys characters beyond just the generic.
Okay, my least favorite scene was a tie, because both of these things had the same problem. Okay. It was the dad not hearing Constantine out, and then it was the teacher that didn't hear Constantine out. That drove me crazy! That guy's like, wait, what are you doing here? Okay, here's the thing. My wife and I had a conversation about this, and she put it best when she said, there's a fence between you! Like, you're okay, so he looks a little shady maybe, and he has every reason to wonder why Constantine is there, but he's not going to be able to do anything to the kids with the fence there in the 3 seconds it will take you to turn your head behind you and make sure he's not wrong. Right? That was really stupid. He was just like, no, I'm not turning around. No. And then John's like, okay, the kid's probably dead now. Yeah, that was really... That
guy should be feeling bad about himself. I mean, a kid...
That guy should be fired!
Because of that.
Yeah, he should be fired. He's profiling. No, really, because he didn't notice John before that. He doesn't know how long John's been standing there. He could have just been walking by. He wasn't necessarily a stalker or something.
Yeah, that's totally fair.
Just because he's wearing a trench coat? Yeah, that was really stupid. Anyway, we don't usually have worse moments on the show. The show's usually really good, but that was dumb. That was more typical TV than the show's ever been. It makes me happy to know that it was an earlier script, and they have probably completely gotten past that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So
the writers seem to act as if not like they're embarrassed by the episode, but clearly this was a last second thought kind of thing.
Compared to the others, I would be.
Yeah.
It's not terrible TV, but compared to the others, which are elevated generally, I would be. Quotes. What was your favorite quote for the episode?
I really like the line that John says to Chaz in the opening of the episode, or somewhere near the opening, where he says, if I need you, I'll give you a little whistle, then suddenly choke into silence.
Word choice in the show is always really strong. He says things that always make me go, yep, that's John.
Yeah, agreed. And then there was also that line I mentioned earlier about if you want to save a child, just remember what it was like to be one. And then John's ending monologue of, and what about my rotten inner child? If humanity's what can save us, then overcoming the damage and weakness in my nature, it may be the part of this battle that I dread the most.
I liked, I had several. I liked I've Never Punched an Angel.
When did we get to use that line?
He introduced Daddy's head with an axe. Again, just his turns of phrase I was really like. And then when he said, here's the thing we can't just go and say, hello, we tracked an evil spirit to your house. Might be in your kid. You mind if we take a look? That was pretty good. Once again, turns of phrase, I love this. What's in that jacket? I am.
I laughed out loud with that one.
And then Manny's line, if you want to save a kid, you got to try to remember what it's like to be one. Guest stars, a bunch of kind of nobodies as far as I could tell. I looked up a couple, and folks have been in things I hadn't seen before. So a lot of new up-and-comers.
Yeah, the guy that played the father was on he was in Watchmen as Mothman.
Oh, I didn't look that one up.
Yeah, it was funny.
That is funny.
Costume and everything. It's hilarious. He's in Warehouse 13 in Eureka. The woman that played the mother was on Mad Men, Sarah Connor Chronicles, and Burn Notice. But again, just smaller roles.
And then that and then that kid you said from Amazing Spider-Man 2.
Yeah, he plays young Peter Parker in both movies.
I can't believe I didn't notice that.
Yeah, he looks a little bit different.
He looked a little familiar, but I didn't think to go look him up. I figured he just reminded me of someone. It didn't even occur to me that he was somebody I knew. Okay. I don't know the Hellblazer at all, so I didn't pick up on any comic book references. Was there anything you noticed? And is the lady from the beginning, and don't say her name because that's my trivia question for today, but is the lady from the beginning a comic book character?
Not as far as I'm aware of.
Because I wondered about that.
I don't think she is.
Okay.
But I will say that this episode's got more comic book references than the other 5.
Oh my goodness. Okay, go ahead.
The first one is the Sword of Night. The Sword of Night.
I forgot about that one.
Which is a thing that not only makes you tell the truth, but makes other people tell the truth. It's like a reverse lasso of truth by Wonder Woman. You got a mention of Chaz's wife, whose name is Renee. The high school is named after Rick Veitch, who wrote a couple of Swamp Thing issues, and John was appeared in those, and you can read those in the original Ascends trade, and they're really good, by the way. They mentioned the ley lines, which is introduced in the Fear Machine story arc, and they become like a thing all the way through the book. You get a map that has the real name of the Swamp Thing, Alex Holland.
I didn't notice that. Wow,
you get
cool.
The ending scene at the Funhouse, like I said earlier, like with the skulls and stuff, it's exactly a Hellblazer cover by Sean Phillips. There's a trick-or-treater dressed as Robin, and there's a mention of John's sister. My
goodness. I'm glad that you have read some Hellblazer. I think that, again, the order is really awkward because we've been wondering since the first episode what the world Chaz even is, and because of the fact that he's seemingly immortal and can't be killed. And if we had gotten a tip-off that he had a family in the second episode, it would have made us wonder more about that, but at least have some information. So, once again, it looks like they had meant for us to know that earlier than this.
Yeah, because we've known that Chaz has a wife just from talking, but I don't think they ever mentioned it in the show until just now.
Yeah, I don't think they have either. I've been waiting for it. I mean, like, you and Eric keep telling me about it, and that's the only reason I know.
Yeah, and the relationship's different in the show, at least from the couple of words he says, than it is in the comics.
At least I don't think he's mentioned her before now.
No, neither do I.
Okay, cool. Thank you for that. This episode did not give me, did not spark any new predictions or anything because it just didn't feel like it added a whole lot. Did this make you think, oh, they're going to do this?
No, not at all. I know someone guessed that Manny might be the guy that betrays John because the Constantine movie. The only reason I don't think that's going to happen is because it happened in the Constantine movie. I figured they'd want to turn that on their head.
Again, it could happen. I just feel like that's a little too obvious, and I feel like the word betray is almost the wrong word at that point. Just because we're supposed to be suspicious of him. I guess we've talked about this, but like we're supposed to be suspicious of him. The first episode, John clearly doesn't trust angels at all and feels like both angels and demons are too close to the same thing. I don't have any reason to think that just because he says I'm giving you guidance, like he's acting so duplicitous anyway that like I feel like it's almost not a betrayal. It's almost, well, I was never with you in the first place. I mean, a betrayal generally implies that there was a time that you at least even sort of thought about being on the person's side.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess at that point it could be like Chaz still. I feel like Chaz is the only logical choice.
And I feel like it could still be a thing that a person can come back from. If they play it, what I almost hope they do with it is they play it the same way. I know I keep going back to this episode, but the same way they played John having to manipulate that guy into being the sacrifice, where it turns into, yeah, somebody's betraying him, but we the audience can't see what else he could have done.
Yeah.
That would be really nice. And if they do that with Zed, even though Zed's the obvious way to go, they could make me more surprised by it. But I think Chaz is the person to do that with. If you did it.
I think Chaz is definitely the one, because there's going to be episodes dedicated to him down the line. Zed's a hardball because they're doing a lot of stuff off the page, and there's a very specific comic book thing with her, and they made reference to it last episode. So I almost don't want to say anything until we get more information, because it could really go either way with her.
Let's go on now, as always, to trivia questions. And Steve, what was your question from last time?
Okay, last time it was in Gotham Central. Both Jim Corrigan and Crispus Allen were main characters who would eventually become the Spectre, and Corrigan killed Allen. And in this specific series, who killed Corrigan to avenge Allen? And the answer is his son, Mel Allen. I said this series specifically because when you get to Final Crisis, they changed this, and it's actually Mel's brother, Jacob.
Oh, wow, okay. Somebody tried to answer that but got it wrong, and I should have looked it up. I didn't, so some other folks might have got, sorry about that, might have gotten it, but the one I got from Zombie Thing again was actually wrong. So Zombie Thing was first, but he got it wrong this time. He said it was Jordan Rich.
I don't think it was Jordan Rich. I mean, I remember the issue specifically said it was Mel Allen.
So anyway, and if Zombie Thing is Steve, then Steve purposely answered his own question incorrectly.
Maybe I did it to throw you off. You never know.
My question last time was, what is the one thing that John learns about Zed in the moment when he is hoping that she'll tell him more, and it is only that she does not care for champagne, and that once again was answered by Zombie Thing MD. So congratulations to you. But some other folks need to get quicker on the draw, because he's been doing like nearly every episode and driving people crazy. Unless it's Steve. But no, congratulations to you. Way to be so quick on the button. And now it's time for this week's trivia questions. And Steve, what do you have for us?
Okay, so in this episode we receive a quick mention of John's sister. And since this is all about children and parents and stuff, what's the name of John's sister's child? Or in other words, what's the name of John's niece?
Ah, cool. This time I've got, as always from the episode, I've got one, but I've also got a bonus. And my first is, what is the name of the girl that John has a one-night stand with at the beginning of the episode? That came out of nowhere, but it was really funny.
She had a name?
Yep, she had a name. They actually play that up because he calls her by name, and then when somebody else walks in and calls her by name, he's surprised that he got it right. He's like, "Oh, really? That was your name? Wow, awesome! I'm batting 1,000." That was really funny. So yeah, she has a name, and it seems somewhat significant to me because of the fact that John was surprised that he got it right. The second one is more obscure, but something that they kept cutting to in the scene just before the kid gets possessed, when he thinks there's a monster in his closet. And because they kept cutting over there, my eyes kept going to it, and I thought I would ask the question, what classic board game does the kid who's afraid of monsters have next to that closet at the bottom of a stack of other games? There's puzzles, some other things there, but the most obvious, the easiest one to read, right at the bottom, classic board game. What was that? And if you think you know the answer to either or all three of our questions, either or all three, I was an English major, any of our questions, feel free to go to Geekvolution.com, go to the contact page, and send us your answers there in the form there. I almost said in the form of a question. You don't have to give it in the form of a question.
This is Jeopardy.
It's not Jeopardy. It's not Constantine Jeopardy. And anyway, as always, we sure appreciate you watching. Steve and I obviously are going to be doing this unless Eric has a chance to come back. Hope he does. I don't mean to replace you. I mean, maybe all three of us. But
I hope he does. He can definitely pick up on a lot more stuff than I can with comics and stuff.
Thank you again for doing this, Steve. We will obviously still be doing this for the remainder of the episodes, and hopefully it gets renewed and keeps going. And in the meantime, I am Captain Logan.
And I'm Steve Baxi.
And we shall see you again next time.